Thank you for joining us for our second session in the Lunch and Learn series. For those of you that weren't with us last week, I'd like to introduce Frank Greenagle. Frank is our resident clinical consultant. Frank is a social worker who specializes in addiction and recovery treatment, PTSD, grief, counseling, and finding direction. He's licensed in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. He is the director of clinical supervision at Prevention Links and oversees the First Recovery High School. He also established and runs the internship program here at Prevention Links. Frank is an adjunct professor at Rutgers University School of Social Work. He drives up to Albany a few times a month in order to serve as the head therapist for the New York State Troopers Employee Assistance Program. Frank has worked with teenagers for over 20 years. He's taught English at Elizabeth High School for 3 years and created the Adolescent Outpatient Treatment Program at Hunterdon Drug Awareness. He ran the Recovery House at both Rutgers, New Brunswick, and Newark for 5 years. Frank has served on the Governor's Council for Alcohol and Drug Abuse from 2021 to 2022 and was the chairman of the New Jersey Heroin and Opiate Task Force. He serves as a board of directors for the Hazelton Betty Ford from 2014 to 2017, and he served on the NASW New Jersey board from 2018 to 2020. In 2018, the president of the New Jersey State Senate, Stephen Sweeney, appointed Frank to the New Jersey Youth Suicide Prevention Advisory Council. One thing that we want to note about Frank is his use of profanity, his love of sports. Occasionally he's frustrated with humanity, and background as a borderline juvenile delinquent usually makes him a hit with the crowd. So prepare yourselves for an interesting and interactive presentation. Without further ado, Frank.
Thank you very much, Lapisa, and welcome everybody to our Lunch and Learn. Let's get right to it. Even quickly before I get to the introductions here about what we're going to cover, I want to start with Washington poison control. Washington State and Colorado State were the first states to legalize recreational marijuana as effective January 1st, 2014. So these are calls to poison control in Washington. So you see 2011 before it passes, 2012 when it passes, 2014 when marijuana is first sold statewide, up to 2017. If we break it down by age, this is Washington, and I'll give you nationwide data and current data in a second. But I just want you to take a look at that far graph on the left. So this is cannabis exposure by age, and we look at 0 to 5 years old. So I'm not even going to address, kids 6 to 12 or teenagers 13 to 18, just addressing 0 to 5. So in 2011, there was like 10 cases. Once you see legalization in Washington, it's 35. In 2015 and 2016, it's 15. And 2017, 80 cannabis exposure cases where someone actually calls Washington State poison control because their 0 to 5 year old took marijuana. Obviously, they took marijuana accidentally. Here's what the numbers look like nationally for kids 0 to 5. I say this because we don't know what ingesting THC products, whether it's a brownie or a lozenge or gummies or other form of candy. The National Data Center said there was 207 cases. We know there's way more than 207 cases because we know that there was like 90 alone in Washington State. Look at the jumps: 207 to 590 to 983 to 2203 to 3,000 in 2021. This is just going up incredibly. Just a big warning graph. To be very clear, we are living in an age of mis and disinformation. Misinformation is information that's wrong, and that information is sometimes people are just saying stuff they don't know, or they find stuff and they think it's relevant and it's not. Disinformation is when people purposely lie. They purposely give bad information. And we're living in an era right now where people are getting all kinds of mis and disinformation about all kinds of things, whether it's health-related issues, whether it's social-related issues, whether it's political issues, economic issues, or all of the above. There was a tremendous amount of misinformation and disinformation that's put forward about marijuana. I'll go through a quick disclosure, some major points to consider, and those are just for your consideration. I'm only going to focus on a couple of things today. I've been conducting trainings and talks on on marijuana for the last 11 years, across New Jersey, of course, but around the country as well. I'll talk briefly what the marijuana New Jersey law looks like right now, with a particular focus on for people under 21. We'll go through what marijuana looked like then and looks like now. I'll focus on the brain and the body, and then where do we go from here, and I'll give you some further reading. So very quickly, I have no financial relationship with a pharmaceutical or insurance company. This is significant because whenever I talk about problems with marijuana, particularly people bring up, well, what about medicinal marijuana? And I point out a lot of the problems with it. People assume that I'm in cahoots with a pharmaceutical company, and that's not true. I can offer warning signs and be critical of marijuana, particularly medicinal marijuana, and not be in cahoots with pharmaceutical companies. So major points to consider, and the ones in bold are what I'm going to really focus on. I really want to come away with a clear understanding of effects on the brain and the body. Big takeaway from today is that no one knows anything about the long-term effects of marijuana that is sold with 10% strength THC or longer. It is a fairly new thing, and we just don't know what the long-term effects. We have a pretty good sense of long-term side effects of marijuana that's 5% strength and less, but we have very little knowledge of what it's going to be like 10% strength. I've talked about poison control already. To be very clear, I'm not talking about municipal and state revenue. Kevin Tibet, who is probably the leading authority on marijuana in the United States, he argues that marijuana is revenue negative, that as much money as states get from taxing, it costs them much more in terms of health problems, legal problems, workforce productivity problems, school productivity problems. There's a question of zoning. Where do marijuana stores go? Do they go in poor communities? Do they go in wealthy communities? Do they go in middle-class communities? In those communities, where do we put them? Do we put them near train stations? Do we put them near schools? If you own a business, are you comfortable with a marijuana store being put next to you? These are issues of debate and discussion. There's a real problem with driving under the influence. That's something that has to be addressed. There's an oral swab test being used in New York State by the New York State troopers. That is the only example of it right now. I do expect that in the next year or two, we'll see the oral swab all over places. Social justice issue. I talked about that a little bit with the zoning issue. Which towns and neighborhoods will marijuana be sold in? I invite you to look up where New Jersey is currently sold legally. What is the equity of marijuana store ownership? The idea was who gets to sell. Is it going to be people who look like me? Is it going to be people who are overly arrested for a long period of time? Will it be minority owners? Will it be female owners? What will it look like? And what does it look like if you legalize marijuana, which we have? What does it mean for the people who have criminal justice issues? These are the things I want you to think about. These are things I'm not talking about today. How does legalization affect use? Anytime you legalize anything, use goes up. That happens with alcohol, it happened with prescription drugs, it has happened with marijuana. After all this information, I have a couple points at the very end about what we can do for education, prevention, and counseling. Marijuana is very, very big business. So as you can see, there's a chart here from 2016 to 2022 showing what the legal marijuana market looks like in the United States. With only a handful of states having legalized marijuana in 2016, it was an $8.9 billion industry. Obviously, you see a massive jump in the numbers during COVID in 2020 and 2021. It was a $24 billion industry in 2020. It was a $32 billion industry in 2021, a $41 billion industry in 2022. In 2023, it's expected that the marijuana market in the United States, the legal marijuana in the United States, will be $51 billion. That's the same as the New Jersey budget. So Americans will spend the same amount of marijuana as the state of New Jersey spends to run our schools and build and repair our roads and pay our officials and all of that goes in. It's estimated that by 2028 that marijuana will be a $102 billion legal industry. As you can see, medical cannabis makes up a portion of that, but the majority of it is going to be people for recreational use. So legal status that hasn't changed in 2023. You can see the green is where the states have it legal. The light green is medical only. There's only 3 states at this point where it's completely illegal in all forms. A majority of voters in every single state think that marijuana should be legal. We're going to see this trend continue. If we break it down by political parties, every single political orientation, majority supports legalization. Republicans to a much smaller extent than independents and Democrats, but people across the political spectrum generally support legalization. I got this in the mail last year. This came to my house, not because I'm a targeted marijuana user or CBD user, just because it's such big business. And so now not only are you seeing marijuana plants and marijuana oils and marijuana gummies sold, but now you're seeing CBD-laced food. So in New Jersey, what does it look like today, right now? You are not allowed to grow marijuana in your home. It is legal to smoke it in your home. It is not legal to smoke in public. You must be 21 or over if you are going to buy it or possess it. Towns could opt out regarding sales within that town. So, for example, there's no stores where it's selling it in Piscataway. There are stores in New Brunswick that are selling it. Minors cannot be arrested by cops for underage marijuana or alcohol use for first offense, but parents can be informed. So what happens with the first offense for someone who is under 18? Officers issue a written warning, or people who are under 18, they will let the parent or guardian know about the warning. If someone is caught a second time under 21, they are given another warning, and they're given some material about where you can get drug treatment. For people who are under 18, police officer provides the parent or guardian with copies of the warning. After the third offense, not only are people given warnings and information about drug treatment services, but there are no penalties and no treatment recommendation. When legalized marijuana opened a year and a half ago in New Jersey, this is what the lines look like in the original stores, literally around the block. Inside, it has a very modern, professional atmosphere with kiosks and information and all kinds of different marketing tools. I got these off of Ledger's reporting. I did not go to examine it myself. And you see kiosks, much like you might order food in some places. You can see how it's sold. You know, you can buy a smidgen of that. You can buy a whole lot of it. Marijuana between the 60s and the 1980s, I know this is a long time ago, THC content was 1 to 5% strength. Very drab green colors, fairly weak. There are thousands upon thousands of websites about marijuana. These are some common ones, but there's all kinds of marijuana websites. Again, these things are not licensed. They're not regulated. Anybody can access them. I looked at a couple of new ones this morning, not on this list, and all it did was ask me, do you certify that you're over 18? Do you certify that you're over 19? Do you certify that you're over 21? So if you are working in a school, if you're working with kids, if you have kids yourself, they use your phone, they have their own phone, they have iPads or Kindles or whatever else, they can access information and learn about marijuana. Now, remember, I started this off by saying we are living in an age of misinformation and disinformation. A lot is, well, let's go through what some of this information looks like. I'm just gonna do a couple of these. I want people to be aware of, you know, kind of what you're walking into here. AK-47, and this is directly taken from Leafly. Will leave you relaxed and mellow. This sativa-dominant hybrid delivers a steady and long-lasting cerebral buzz that keeps you mentally alert and engaged in creative and social activities. Break down, while AK-47 scent is sour and earthy, its sweet floral notes can be fully realized in its taste. Anybody can read that of any age, and they can look at the plant. At no point does it say, hey, we're concerned about this, or this, or too much does this or this, or cause some kind of sleep issues, or if your anxiety is going to spike it. Instead, it just says it's got these sweet tastes, and it delivers a steady and long-lasting cerebral buzz. From WikiLeaks, AK-47 says that the highest test of AK-47 marijuana they found was 20% THC strength, and the average test was 14% strength.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Manny.
What comes up with these names?
It's just a marketing thing. So anyone comes up with them. So obviously, like, they come up with all kinds of different names to appeal to people to get them to pay attention. Additionally concerning here on this next one is that what are the common uses? Now, again, this is not a therapist putting on, this is not a medical researcher, this is not a government scientist. This is just someone saying, here are the reasons why people use AK-47 marijuana, and they said anxiety, and they said it's great for anxiety. This is not just misinformation, this is disinformation. Look at that. Average strength, 24% strength marijuana. Then we have Skywalker OG, and so you see, these look very, very different than the dark drab green color marijuana that was 1 to 5% THC strength. These are much, much stronger, with much more evocative names. We have Purple Kush, which measures anywhere from 17 to 27% strength THC as well. And again, you can see all kinds of different colors, all kinds of extra THC crystals to make this very, very strong. Strawberry banana, I'm not going to go through too many more of these. I just want to give you a sense. Again, this is from marijuanabreak.com. The average THC level is closer to 26%, which still makes it one of the most reliable, potent strains in the world. Strawberry banana is known for its incredible taste, which is akin to tropical strawberry. White Tahoe cookies. This is from marijuanabreak.com also. It affects on the body, the brain. Actually, this is the area I want to spend the most time on today. So to be very clear, any use of marijuana is considered 3 times or more a week. Now, that is not a moral statement. That is not a behavioral statement. That is made based, that was a determination by the federal government 40 years ago. It was really about marijuana half-life. So it takes, on the average person, it takes about a week for marijuana to break down in the body. So the half-life is how much time has to pass until half of it is gone. So the half-life of marijuana is about a week. So the idea of heavy use is that if you're using it 3 times a week, you're keeping a constant rate in the body. You're never letting it diminish because you keep putting it in there. And then we look at long-term use as 6 months or longer. So we consider a long-term heavy use as someone who has been using 3 times a week for a period of 6 months or longer. Now again, Long-term uses because of buildup of the breaking down in the body over time. So if you're using 3 times a week for more than 6 months, there's a lot of effects that happen in the brain, white blood cells, and the fat cells of the body. There's been a multi-decade Swedish study, and now again, look at the language that we're using here. Suggests, it's not stating for a fact, because again, we need to research this more. But the study suggests increased rates of severe mental health conditions for long-term heavy use by teenagers. The major focus being on untreated PTSD, causing or exacerbating symptoms of depression, causing or exacerbating symptoms of anxiety, causing or exacerbating symptoms of ADHD. I think everyone here can at least agree on that. We've seen increased rates in the last several years of depression and anxiety in teenagers. Now we add very strong marijuana to this, it exacerbates and increases these symptoms. A lot of times people will talk about how marijuana is not addictive. Well, marijuana is addictive, and they'll say, well, marijuana doesn't cause overdoses like heroin or alcohol or benzodiazepines, and that's absolutely true. But marijuana does cause physical dependence, and the number one form of physical dependence, and notice I put this in the brain because sleep affects the brain and the body, of course. The number one sign of dependence on marijuana is sleeping issues, whether it's trouble falling asleep, whether it's trouble staying asleep, sleeping too long or too little, or not feeling well rested. Again, a lot of people have sleep issues to begin with. Come across all kinds of high school and especially college students who smoke marijuana to fall asleep. What they find out though is that on the days that they don't smoke marijuana, they have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. So it becomes this big sleep aid. Then when you stop using, sleep is really impaired from anywhere from 30 to 90 days. It can affect memory and concentration, although it's not great measurements for that, but it's pretty clear. Kevin Sabet, who I will provide you information about his books at the end of this today, cites over 20,000 peer-reviewed research articles linking marijuana to severe mental health outcomes from depression to psychosis. This is a headline from 2022, and you're seeing really big problems with mental health risk of high-potency cannabis. And so there are some products which I didn't even get to today. I just showed you marijuana as a plant form, with 20, 25, 32% THC strength. There are waxes and oils that go up to and above 90%. Again, we have no idea what this does, but they are saying that the high potency products really lead to increased psychological dysfunction. I want to look at the bottom there. That last paragraph is why I put this in here. The new high THC products aren't legal for those under 21 in states with recreational marijuana, but teenagers say they're easily accessible. There's links to breathing issues, of course, because you're smoking it. There's mild links to cancer, and there's anecdotal benefits. So anecdotal means people report something. For people with HIV/AIDS, stage 4 cancer, glaucoma, and a few other diagnoses. If someone who has HIV or AIDS, if someone is in stage 4 cancer, if someone has glaucoma, understand they're going through a lot of pain, they might be having medication problems with medication side effects. So what my real concern is that in this case for today, kids who have anxiety issues, kids who grew up in homes or areas of trauma, kids with depression, kids who have difficulty concentrating, using marijuana as the cure-all for this, because not only does it not cure it, but it often makes those issues worse. What does the data look like? It's murky, but getting much more clear for 5% THC long-term. We have no idea of the long-term effects of 10%. And again, I talked to you about 20 and 32%, and with the high potency, 90%. We have no idea about what the long-term effects are because this is still fairly new, so we don't know what it's going to do to people long-term. But again, there's really strong links to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and ADHD. To be very clear, anyone who claims awful harm, that people are going to attempt or complete suicide, or they're going to be permanently put into a psych ward, is being very dishonest. And for someone who says that it has amazing health benefits and you're going to feel better, it's going to cure your depression, they're blatantly being dishonest. One of the key things that came up from selling it in shops is that people will say, at least we know what's in it. They found that over 30% of marijuana that's sold in New Jersey alone isn't labeled correctly. And so it doesn't say if there's pesticides being put on the plants. We're also finding that labs are often mislabeling strength of something. So sometimes something might be 20% strength when it's 10% strength, or sometimes something might be 20% strength when they say it's 30% strength. And so it hasn't been done correctly. And so the idea that at least we know what's in it doesn't hold much water. Key data points, what we've seen is hospitalizations from marijuana have increased since legalization. In Colorado, they've gone up 101%. In Alaska, they've gone up 45%. We've seen this in every single state that's legalized marijuana. We've seen an increase of hospital visits due to marijuana. You might ask, well, why would someone go to a hospital for marijuana? People have panic attacks, and so they go to the emergency room. There's also a small percentage of the population, I think it's about 5 or 6%, experience a very severe vomiting syndrome from heavy regular marijuana use. And so obviously they're vomiting over and over, they're going to go to the emergency room. As of 2019, in states that legalize marijuana, we've seen a 25% increase in marijuana misuse disorder among teenagers. Remember, it was not legalized for teenagers. It was legalized 21 and over. But in the states that legalized it, we've seen an increase in diagnosing of teenagers. Plant potency in 2008, average plant potency was 8.9%. In 2017, that almost doubled to 17.1%. In 2022, we're still waiting on the data of what the average plant potency is today, but you can see a trend even with only 2 data points. Some more data points for today. Now this is percentage of THC and CBD. CBD is the blue line, THC is the red line, in cannabis samples seized by the DEA between 1995 and 2021. Now, most marijuana in the country is sold either illegally or legally today. It's not seized by the DEA, so this is just what they've got. And you can see just a steady line and increase of strength of marijuana that the DEA has grabbed over time. You're seeing this upward trend. Concentrate potency in 2008 average was 6.7%, so we're talking about waxes and oils. In 2017, it was 55%. We're still waiting on data from 2022. Look at the other data. It's pretty clear that it's a very big upward moving trend. We have no idea about the long-term mental health and physical health outcomes for ingesting such high potency items. We have no idea what is the effect on teenagers. The legal aspect is only a small part of illicit drugs and opioids. Alcohol and prescription drugs are legal. What we found is legalization means more use. With tobacco, we found legalization means more use. With tobacco, there is the one bright spot that we can look at with marijuana is what happened with tobacco. So tobacco, in particular cigarettes, were ubiquitous in the United States in the 50s and 60s. So a long period of time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where there was lots and lots of education around smoking, the dangers of smoking, the dangers of cigarettes, secondhand smoke, the effect on kids, the effect on pregnant women. And as a result, much less people use tobacco than did 30 years ago. It's very good news if we can use the same strategy that was used with tobacco over 30 years to educate people about marijuana and its effects on the brain and body, in particular teenagers. So where do we need to go from here? I know we have a mixture of people here today. You know, we have parents of kids, of course, we have some teachers, we have a lot of prevention people, we have some counselors, we have some peers, we have some public health and policy people as well. We need to collect more emergency room and hospital admission data related to marijuana. We need to keep monitoring marijuana potency. What are the price trends in legal and illegal markets? We need to make sure we stay aware of what are the number of school incidents related to marijuana. Again, we can start with local districts here in Union County. We should be ever mindful of the extent of marijuana advertising towards young people and its impact. So think back to the CBD infused tater tots and chicken tenders that I showed you at the beginning of this talk. We need to keep data on marijuana related car crashes, including with the levels of THC in their blood, even when they test positive for alcohol. We need to keep monitoring mental health effects of marijuana, and we want to find out what's the percentage of people who are going to treatment and counseling programs who are using marijuana. These other ones are really for policymakers, but we really need to be aware of how much is it going to cost law enforcement for legalization, what is the increase in mental health and addiction treatment related to increased marijuana use, which came from legalization. What is the cost of people who need but can't get treatment? One of the reasons why Prevention Links does a great job at this for, and what NJ4S is for, is that there's all kinds of people who need services around marijuana, either straight up from marijuana because of having a substance misuse disorder, or using marijuana and causing or exacerbating mental health issues. And so there's all kinds of people out there that are suffering who can't afford treatment. And the nice thing is, between Prevention Links and NJ4S, they can get access to free peer services or free counseling and referral services. Reading, I really recommend Kevin Tibet. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from his books. I like the first book better than the second book, Read for Sanity. For those of you who are outside of the organization who are watching this today, there's all kinds of different help that can be accessed, as far as whether it's presentations, people throughout the community, giving direct help to, particularly in this case, teenagers. If you have questions, reach out to Nafisa Downs and email of NJ4S Union at preventionlinks.org. I will open it up to everyone here. Hit me with it.
Something you mentioned earlier, which is how marijuana usage affects other drug use.
So for a long time, people have argued that marijuana is a gateway drug, and if you use marijuana, you're more likely to use cocaine or heroin. I don't believe the idea that marijuana is a gateway drug. I look much more as at tobacco and prescription drugs being huge gateway drugs compared to marijuana. There's lots of people who use marijuana and they stop there. They don't move on to something more illegal or stronger. But I think I referenced something about marijuana use and its effect on opioids. And one of the things that people argued for a bit was that people can take marijuana for pain instead of opiates, and therefore have less addiction, less opiate overdoses. What's been found in the United States and in Australia is that people who take, who had opiates for pain, who are prescribed marijuana for pain, eventually they just mix opiates and marijuana together. We've also found that originally the idea was that the states that legalize marijuana for use of medical treatment of pain would have less use and overdose deaths, and that has not been the case. In all the states with legalized marijuana, we've seen an increased use of opiate deaths as well, but that's across. Whether you legalize marijuana or not, make it medical or not, we've seen an increase in opiate deaths across, and really not much of a rate change in the states that have legalized marijuana. So, it's a huge piece of misinformation that I've really had to combat on a policy for the spectrum, on policy areas, was that marijuana reduce opiate deaths, and that's just not been the case. And the Australians actually argue that marijuana with opiates has led to way more problems than just opiates alone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for an informative presentation. Just want to let everyone know that you'll be able to access this information on our website, on our social media pages. If you leave this interaction, this space, and you do have more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If this is not the space that you want to have a conversation in, we can accommodate you and talk about those things that you need to. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Please let your networks know that we do this every Monday from 12 to 1. We have 3 more sessions we'd like to see. We'd like to expand our reach. So feel free to share the link and the information with your networks. Again, thank you very much for joining us.